Sleeping in a freezing tent should kill you in hours. No heater, no insulation, thin fabric between you and sub-zero air. That's the rule. But every winter, homeless people break it. Night after night, in temperatures that freeze water solid. They wake up the next morning still alive. No high-tech gear, no backup plan, just scraps, improvisation, and a system that most people never even think about. Here's the part that sounds wrong. They're not surviving because they stay warm. They're surviving because they stop heat from escaping. Big difference. Most people think cold is the enemy, that if you can't generate heat, you're done. That's why they panic. That's why they fail. Because the real game isn't about making heat. It's about defending the heat your body already makes. Here's the thing. Your body is already a heater. Right now. Constantly producing warmth just to keep you alive. The problem? In a freezing tent, that heat leaks out faster than you can replace it. And once that balance tips, you don't just feel cold. You spiral. First, your hands go numb. Then, your core temperature drops. Then, your body starts shutting systems down to survive. Decision-making slows. Movement gets sloppy. And that's when small mistakes turn fatal. So the people who make it through the night, they're not tougher. They're not lucky. They're running a system. A system built around one brutal truth. You don't need more heat. You need less loss. And once you understand that, everything changes. Because the real question isn't, how do you stay warm? It's, what's stealing your heat right now? Here's what amateurs get wrong. The cold isn't what's killing you. It's heat loss. You can survive freezing temperatures longer than you think, if you keep the heat your body is already making. But out here, two enemies are working against you every second, and they don't care how tough you are. First, wind. Wind is a thief, a relentless one. Your body naturally builds a thin layer of warm air around your skin. It's your first line of defense. But the moment wind cuts through your shelter, that layer gets stripped away instantly, over and over again. What feels like just a breeze is actually constant heat extraction. That's why people freeze faster on a windy night at 5 degrees Celsius than a still night below zero. The wind doesn't just cool you, it resets your warmth to zero. Then there's the second enemy, moisture. This one's quieter, more dangerous. Wet clothes, damp ground, even your own sweat. Water pulls heat away from your body up to 20 to 25 times faster than dry air. That means if you're even slightly damp, you're not just cold. You're actively losing the fight. Street veterans have a saying, you don't freeze because it's cold. You freeze because you're wet and exposed. And here's the worst part. You can't outlast these enemies by willpower. You don't tough it out. If you don't stop them, they will drain your body heat until your system shuts down. But once you understand this, everything changes. Because staying warm isn't about adding heat. It's about defending what you already have. Here's where things gets interesting. You don't need a better tent. You need a better system. Out here, a $5 tarp can outperform gear that costs hundreds if you stop thinking like a camper and start thinking like someone trying to trap heat, not generate it. Street veterans don't just throw a tarp over themselves and call it a day. They shape it. Low, tight, controlled. Because the goal isn't space, it's air control. You want as little empty air inside your shelter as possible. The bigger the space, the more heat your body has to waste trying to warm it. That's a losing game. So they drop the tarp low, almost uncomfortably low. Just enough room to lie down. No more. Then comes layering. Outer layer? That's your shield. It blocks wind completely. No gaps. No flapping edges. Wind is the enemy that never sleeps. Inner layer? That's your trap. Even a second tarp, a blanket, or plastic sheeting works. It holds the thin layer of warm air your body creates and stops it from escaping. There's an old street trick. Angle the tarp downward, not flat. Heat rises. If your ceiling is too high, your warmth disappears above you. But if it's low and angled, that heat gets pushed back down where you need it. And here's the part most people miss. You're not building a shelter. You're building a microclimate, a small pocket where wind can't enter, heat can't escape, and your body doesn't have to fight the environment all night just to survive. Do it right, and suddenly freezing air outside doesn't matter as much. Do it wrong, and no amount of layers will save you. Here's what most folks won't tell you. This isn't comfort, it's physics. Heat doesn't just disappear, it escapes in predictable ways. And the tarp setup works because it attacks the biggest one, convection. Warm air rises. Cold air replaces it. That constant swap is what drains your body all night. When you lower and seal the tarp, you interrupt that cycle. You trap a thin pocket of warm air close to your body, so your own heat starts recycling instead of leaking out. At the same time, the angled surface forces rising heat to bounce back down instead of pooling uselessly above your head. So what feels like a simple sheet of plastic is actually a heat control system, reducing airflow, slowing heat loss, and keeping your microclimate stable long enough for your body to survive the night. But here's the problem. Blocking wind doesn't matter if your body is still losing heat from below, because even the best tarp setup fails the moment the ground starts stealing warmth faster than you can produce it. And that's where most people make a deadly mistake. They focus on the air, not what they're lying on. Here's a big misconception. Most people blame the air. They're wrong. The real thief is underneath you. The ground doesn't just feel cold. It actively pulls heat out of your body. Constant contact turns your body into a heat source, feeding something that never warms up. Even with a tarp above you, if you're lying directly on the ground, you're losing the fight from below. Cold surfaces conduct heat away from your body far faster than air ever could. That's why someone can survive cold wind but still freeze to the point of danger just by sleeping on frozen soil or concrete. And it gets worse when moisture is involved. Damp ground acts like a heat bridge, accelerating the transfer. The wetter it is, the faster your body temperature drops. This is why experienced street sleepers don't treat the ground as floor. They treat it as an enemy layer. Because you can block wind all you want. But if your back is bleeding heat into the earth all night, you're still in danger. The real fight isn't just above you, it's below you. Now, here's what might confuse you. The cold you feel at night isn't just in the air. It's coming straight through the ground under you. That's why experienced homeless sleepers don't obsess over thicker blankets first. They obsess over what's between them and the earth. Cardboard becomes a game changer here. It looks useless, fragile, temporary, but once you layer it under your body, it traps air in hundreds of tiny pockets. And those pockets matter more than the material itself. Because still, air is insulation. Lay a few flattened boxes under you, and suddenly the ground stops acting like a heat sink, pulling warmth out of your body nonstop. Even a thin layer can slow heat loss dramatically. Now take it further. Inside the jacket, crumpled newspaper becomes a second barrier. Not smooth sheets, crumpled ones. That shape is important. It creates uneven air pockets, just like expensive synthetic insulation used in winter gear. It's not about warmth being added. It's about heat being stuck in place. Some people even layer newspaper between clothing and wrap it around the torso or thighs, where heat loss is fastest. There's a street rule behind this. If you can't afford insulation, you manufacture it out of air, and air is free, if you know how to trap it. So while the outside world sees trash, inside that setup is a carefully engineered buffer zone, slowing down heat loss just enough to make another night survivable. Insulation isn't about adding warmth, it's about slowing heat transfer. Cardboard and crumpled newspaper work because they trap still air, and still air is one of the best natural insulators. Heat normally escapes through three paths: conduction, convection, and radiation. The ground is a powerful conductor. It pulls heat directly from your body. Cardboard interrupts that direct contact, reducing conduction. Meanwhile, the air pockets inside cardboard and crumpled paper stop convection. Without moving air, heat can't circulate away as fast. So instead of your body constantly losing energy into the ground and environment, you're surrounded by a buffer zone that slows the entire process down just long enough to survive the night. But even if you've blocked the ground and trapped heat in your clothes, something more dangerous is still happening. Because your body doesn't just lose heat to the outside environment, it loses it through itself. And if you ignore this next part, you can still freeze, even in a well-insulated setup. Here's the thing, even if your shelter is perfect, you can still freeze because the problem isn't outside anymore. It's you. Your body isn't evenly insulated. Heat escapes through specific hot zones where blood vessels run close to the skin, your neck, wrists, and especially your inner thighs and groin. And when you're lying still in a cold tent, your body starts prioritizing survival. It pulls blood away from your extremities to protect your core. That's good for survival. But it leaves your outer body exposed and steadily cooling. This is where most people lose the fight without realizing it, because you can be fully covered, fully sheltered, and still lose heat internally if those key points are left unprotected. There's also another hidden problem: poor circulation at night. When you stay still for too long in cold conditions, blood flow slows down even more, making it harder for warm blood to reach the areas that need it most. So the real enemy isn't just wind or ground anymore. It's uncontrolled heat distribution inside your own body. Here's a tip nobody will tell you. If your core stays warm, but your blood gets cold on the way to your extremities, you still freeze from the inside out. That's why survival sleepers don't just warm their body. They target where heat moves fastest, your blood vessels. Start with hand warmers, but not just in your hands. That's the beginner mistake. The real trick is placement. Wrists, neck, inner thighs. These are high-traffic blood routes. Warm them, and you're not heating skin. You're heating the bloodstream itself. That warm blood then circulates through your entire body like a built-in radiator system. There's another old street hack, the hot water bottle trick. At gas stations or public taps, people fill a bottle with hot water and press it against the groin area. It sounds crude, but it's strategic. That region contains major arteries close to the surface. Warm it, and the heat spreads fast through the core circulation system. Even small upgrades matter. A warm object tucked under the neck can stabilize core temperature longer than extra clothing sometimes can. Think of it like this. You're not fighting cold air directly anymore. You're controlling the temperature of the fluid that runs your entire system. And once your blood stays warm, your body stops panicking, stops burning energy just to survive, and starts entering a stable survival state instead of constant heat loss. Here's what nobody tells you. Your body isn't a single heat source. It's a circulation system. Warm blood is what keeps your core stable, and that heat gets distributed through major arteries running through key zones, wrists, neck, and inner thighs. That's why targeting those areas works. You're not warming skin. You're directly influencing blood temperature before it circulates through the rest of your body. A hot water bottle near the groin, for example, is effective because the femoral artery is one of the largest blood highways in the body. Heat it there, and that warmth spreads outward naturally. So instead of trying to heat your entire body evenly, you're strategically warming the engine lines that carry heat everywhere else. Here's the thing. If you're still thinking this is just about staying warm, you've missed the real point, because by now, you've seen how tarps trap heat, how cardboard kills ground chill, how even newspaper turns into insulation. But survival doesn't fail from one mistake. It fails from one weak link you don't notice. And most people discover it too late. You can have the perfect shelter, the perfect layering, even a body that's generating heat, and still wake up shivering uncontrollably at 3 a.m. Why? Because heat doesn't just escape through one path. It escapes through pressure points you don't think about. Neck, wrists, inner thighs, open airflow gaps you ignored, moisture you didn't notice building up inside your clothing. This is where most setups collapse. Not because they're bad, but because one small, overlooked detail keeps draining warmth all night. And here's where it gets worse. Even if you fix all of that, your body itself can still sabotage everything you built. because the way you enter sleep determines how much heat you even get to keep. Now, for some important advice. Most people don't freeze because of the night itself. They freeze because of how they enter it. If you crawl into a sleeping bag already cold, your body has nothing left to give. No stored heat, no internal momentum, just a slow, steady drop in temperature until morning feels impossible. And the mistake is thinking the bag will fix it. It won't. A sleeping bag doesn't create heat. It only preserves what's already there. That's why so many survival cases fail right at the start of sleep. The body becomes passive, metabolism slows, and heat production drops hard. In that state, even the best insulation system is just holding on to a losing situation. So the real danger isn't the cold outside. It's entering sleep without enough heat inside you to begin with. Most people go to sleep already losing the battle. If your body enters a sleeping bag cold, it doesn't magically warm up. It just stabilizes at a low temperature and stays there all night. That's why timing matters more than blankets. Before you even lie down, you need to generate heat on purpose. A short burst of intense movement, jumping, fast walking, bodyweight exercises for just 5 minutes, forces your muscles to burn energy and spike your core temperature. You're essentially charging your body like a battery before shutdown. Then comes positioning. The fetal position isn't just comfort, it's efficiency. By curling in, you reduce exposed surface area. Less skin exposed means less heat escaping into the air. Your body naturally protects its core this way. Organs stay tucked in, limbs draw closer, and warmth concentrates where it matters most. Some people also combine this with a final adjustment, pulling knees slightly higher and keeping arms close to the chest, forming a compact heat loop inside the sleeping bag. The goal is simple. Reduce surface, retain core, and enter sleep already warm enough that your body doesn't have to fight to survive the night. But here's the catch. Even a perfectly preheated body and a tight sleeping position won't hold up for long if you're completely isolated. Because warmth isn't just personal, it's shared, transferred, and multiplied. And when you're alone in freezing air, your body is still fighting a losing battle against the environment. Here's some advice that might save your life someday. In extreme cold, survival stops being an individual problem. It becomes a shared heat problem. That's why one of the oldest street survival strategies is simple. Don't sleep alone if you can avoid it. The buddy system isn't about comfort. It's about physics again. When people cluster together, they create a shared heat zone. Each body becomes a heat source for the others. The air trapped between them warms up and stabilizes instead of constantly collapsing into freezing temperatures. Even a small group can raise the effective temperature inside a shelter by several degrees. That difference is often what separates waking up cold from waking up alive. Position matters too. People naturally rotate to minimize exposed sides, almost like puzzle pieces fitting together. Less exposed surface area per person means less total heat loss for everyone involved. And then there's something even more overlooked. Dogs. Dogs carry significant body heat, and in survival situations, they become more than companions. They become living heaters. Curling up against a dog can transfer steady warmth into the human body through constant contact, especially around the torso and legs, where heat loss is highest. There are countless real-world cases where stray or owned dogs have literally saved people from hypothermia simply by staying close through the night. Some groups even coordinate sleep positions, one person at the center, others around them, and animals placed near the coldest edges to act as thermal buffers. Because in freezing conditions, isolation increases risk exponentially, but shared warmth, it stacks. And once you understand that, you stop thinking of survival as, how warm can I stay alone? And start thinking, how much heat can we conserve together? Most people assume survival is about having a better tent, thicker fabric, more poles, more insulation. But in real freezing conditions, that thinking is backwards. A heavy tent doesn't automatically keep you warm. It often just traps cold air inside a bigger volume. You now have to heat with your body. That's wasted energy. And worse, Many people build shelters that look secure, but fail the basics: wind control, moisture control, and heat retention. Wind sneaks through seams. Moisture builds from breathing, and suddenly your safe shelter becomes a damp, heat-draining box. Even expensive setups fail if they ignore airflow management. A sealed tent with no strategy can turn into a condensation trap, making everything inside wet. And wet equals rapid heat loss. So the real enemy isn't lack of shelter. It's bad shelter design that looks protective, but quietly accelerates cold exposure all night long. Here's where things get interesting. Once you've trapped air and blocked wind, the next battle is stopping heat from escaping into nothing. That's where Mylar changes the game. A Mylar sheet or emergency tent doesn't warm you in the traditional sense. It reflects your own body heat back toward you. Think of it as a heat mirror. Whatever warmth your body gives off, instead of disappearing into the night, gets bounced straight back. That's why even a thin reflective layer can outperform much thicker materials when used correctly. Homeless sleepers often combine Mylar with their tarp system. Tarp blocks wind, Mylar reflects heat, and the gap between them becomes a controlled thermal zone. But placement matters. If Mylar is too tight against your body, it loses efficiency. You need a small air gap so heat can radiate, reflect, and return. Some setups even angle Mylar above the sleeping area, like a low ceiling reflector, turning body heat into a loop instead of a loss. And here's the key insight. Mylar doesn't create warmth. It prevents waste. So instead of constantly trying to generate more heat, you're just recycling the heat you already have, again and again, long enough to survive the night. Here's what homeless people learned in time. Survival at night often comes down to small heat winds stacked together. A candle lantern isn't a heater, but it is a stabilizer. The tiny flame adds a slow, steady warmth to a confined space, just enough to slightly raise the baseline temperature inside a well-sealed setup. More importantly, it changes how the air behaves, reducing that sharp, dead cold feeling. Then, there are hand warmers. Most people use them wrong. They're not just for palms. They matter most when placed near heat arteries, wrists, neck, inner thighs. That's where warmth enters circulation fastest. Even small habits matter. Keeping clothes dry, sealing gaps at the neck and ankles, and reusing warm pockets of air inside layered clothing. None of these tools are powerful alone, but together they create micro improvements that add up into one critical outcome: slowing heat loss just enough to survive another night. Now, let's discuss something you might overlook. In freezing conditions, the most dangerous idea is the one that feels like the fastest solution. Propane heaters inside tents are a perfect example. They produce instant warmth, which is why they seem like a lifesaver. But what most people don't realize is what comes with that heat. Carbon monoxide. It's invisible, odorless, and it builds up quietly inside enclosed spaces. You fall asleep thinking you've solved the cold problem, but your body is actually losing oxygen without warning. There's no coughing alarm, no obvious signal, just gradual shutdown. That's why experienced survival users treat combustion heat sources inside sealed shelters as a last resort, or not at all. Even small flame-based heating changes the air balance inside a tent. Oxygen drops, moisture rises, and condensation builds faster, which ironically makes everything colder over time. So what's the safer rule? Ventilation always beats sealing. Even a small crack, just an inch of airflow, can be the difference between dangerous gas buildup and breathable air. It sounds counterintuitive. You want to seal warmth in, but in reality, you're balancing two enemies: cold and suffocation. And survival means choosing the one you can actually manage. Warmth isn't just about sealing everything shut. If your shelter is airtight, you're not just trapping heat. You're trapping moisture and dangerous gases too. That's why a small ventilation gap matters. Cracking the tent just an inch creates airflow that removes condensation and keeps oxygen circulating, while still preserving most of your trapped heat. Done right, it's a balance. Enough air to stay safe, but not enough to let the entire heat system collapse overnight. None of this is about comfort. It's about control. When you break it down, Surviving a freezing night in a tent isn't luck, and it's not expensive gear either. It's a system built from small decisions, each one slowing heat loss just enough to keep your body functioning until morning. Block the wind, and you stop the air from stealing your warmth. Stay dry, and you stop moisture from multiplying heat loss. Trap still air with cardboard and layers, and you slow the ground from draining you. Warm your blood, not just your skin, and you change how your entire body distributes heat. And when possible, share warmth instead of fighting the cold alone. None of these tricks are powerful on their own, but together, they stack. They compound. They turn a deadly environment into something barely survivable. And that's the real truth most people miss. Survival in freezing conditions isn't about beating the cold. It's about losing heat slower than it can kill you. If you understood even part of this system, you're already thinking differently than most people ever will. And there are more survival systems like this that most people never hear about. So if you want deeper breakdowns like this, real-world survival logic, hidden street strategies, and practical systems that actually work, subscribe to the channel.